Welcome to Pods with Posh and Paul, a podcast designed to inspire and challenge listeners through story, experience and insight. To face adversity, learn from suffering and discover how to embrace life with a heart filled with love and gratitude. We are so thrilled to have you journey with us and can't wait to share your stories. Join Sue O'Callaghan and Joanne Webb as we disrupt the theory that everyone has perfect lives.
Hi, welcome and thanks so much for listening. Today we have with us the founder of Motov8, the Australian-based company that delivers events and seminars to boys aged 11 to 17 to help them make smarter and more informed decisions in life. John McMahon, also known as The Rev, is a youth specialist with a passionate desire to inspire, inform and instruct young people to discover, live and fulfil their dreams, to help them expand those dreams to be about something bigger than themselves so they can add value to their world. Rev is as raw and as real as they come and openly shares stories of his youth when he himself made choices that led to his life going completely off track and out of control. Rev understands boys, he understands how they operate and how they think. And his honest and sometimes brutal approach just seems to resonate with the boys and their families. And you only have to read his reviews to see how much impact that he is having on people's lives. Motov8 events have influenced thousands of young people and families across Australia and now New Zealand. We are so pleased to have on the show The Rev.
So, John, thank you for joining us today.
My pleasure.
So we came to see you speak last night. You were in Auckland and you've come with your company Motov8, which is working with teen boys and parents, and your message to parents is predominantly to take their authority back in parenting.
That's right, yeah, that's what we're about.
So tell us a little bit more about the entire business. So Motov8, where did it come from?
Okay, so Motov8 as an entity came from me working as a chaplain to MotoGP. So I was working at the racetrack with riders, with their families, with their crews, and if ever there's an incident, then the chaplain's role there is to be a support to them. So it could be a racing accident, it could be a new contract that's coming up, it could be stress, not able to focus, and you are there to help guide them in that. And I was in a caravan watching a race. That's where you would watch them from. So if you could see an incident, you would know where to respond to. And it just dawned on me, sort of like the start of Mr. Bean. I don't know if you watched that show, where the light comes down on him. That the same principles that racers use on track to keep themselves on track and to be competitive and to progress would work in real life for boys. And so I ride motorcycles, I race motorcycles. So for me, it made sense. If it made sense for me, it'll make sense for boys. That's where the idea started. I was working in a high school at the time, and I booked a 3x3 metre cage inside the metalwork room, rolled a motorcycle in there, and had 6 boys come in for the first ever workshop. And then I just rehearsed and practiced, and the idea sort of grew from there.
So how long ago was that?
That was 11 years ago.
Wow. And now you're selling out big rooms, doing big events.
Yeah, it's very exciting. But I'm one of those people where I'm never satisfied, and like in a good way. Mm-hmm. So I'll go into an event and we'll have 250, 300. Last week we nearly had 500 people. But I don't know, if you like fishing, as soon as you get a fish on the hook, you want to get the hook back out and get the next one, because my goal is to influence millions of young people and their families. So I don't, yeah.
I have to say, I really like the symbolism that you're using in terms of metaphors to reach boys through biking is quite an important message, isn't it? Because you cross-transfer the message of anger. What was it you were using last night to relate to anger? You had a lovely message there up on screen. Can you tell us a bit more about that?
So we were talking about how anger is a secondary emotion, and how, unlike all our other emotions, anger is triggered by another emotion, so which is usually around pain of some sort: physical pain, emotional pain, social pain. It could be the stress of being in a in an environment that you don't feel safe in. And I told a couple of stories last night about being in schools where incidents have happened. One where a boy threw in a razor and it hit another boy in the head, and he immediately got up and picked up his chair and threw it back across. And I talk about emotionally charged moments and how if you don't have a strategy in place that you have planned, practiced and rehearsed, then you'll go with what is ever in your head that day. And so there are lots of people, in prison who it was just the wrong day, the wrong time, and they made a decision that if they had the time again, they would never do it. And the boys are in front of principals. They are, sacked from their jobs because they didn't have a strategy to deal with that exact thing, a thing that happens commonly in their life, and they just went with whatever was in their head that day, and it brought them undone.
And for parents listening now who might say, John, that's all very well, and we have anger issues with our boys at home, but what is that strategy? They want to know strategy. You gave such a lovely example last night. Could you just explain what that was?
So I get boys to keep it simple. What's the one thing that brings you undone the most? Because you'll find it is common, and people will go, it's everything. I'll go, we'll pick one. So the boy last night, it was about swearing, and so swearing is expression, it's communication, but it's communication of pain. And so we said, basically, okay, your number one thing that you want to change is swearing. So let's look at what you would like to do instead of doing that. And he said last night he would like to be able to walk away instead of blowing his stack and venting on these people or in these moments. He would like to be able to walk away, and that does sound the perfect answer.
Yeah.
But it is simple. That is what you'd like to be able to do. But it's the next thing you've got to understand. You've got to connect significant meaning to it. It's got to mean more for you to walk away than it is for you to let it all out. It's so easy to let it out and crumble and fall apart. But to walk away, it's got to mean something more. With a puppy, if a puppy runs away, you can get it to come back to you two ways. You can yell at it and the thing will cower and come back, or you can become more exciting than the thing it's distracted by. Mm-hmm. And that's what this is like. It's got to mean more to you. It's got to be more interesting, more exciting. It's got to light you up more to walk away than to let your anger out in a moment.
So to find a significant meaning for the child, but also you asked, interestingly, was there a significant meaning for somebody else, their parent?
Yeah.
So it's a double whammy in a way, isn't it?
Well, it is.
Motivation.
Yeah. I mean, if there is a completely broken relationship between parent and child, then that's not going to be added motivation. But in the events, if I uncover that, then I start working with the parent. And I will. I'll say, well, do you want to do this now? It's awkward. There's a full room here, but you want to get a result because you're asking something of your child that you haven't actually invested in. And so I was taught, one of my mentors taught me, rules without relationship end in rebellion every time. Mm-hmm. So if you're calling in all these rules and deadlines and this strict relationship with your son, but you haven't invested in relationship with him, he will always fight you.
The most amazing thing last night, the boy himself, when you asked him what it would mean to him, and he actually stood a bit taller, didn't he? And he said, I would be proud of myself. Mm-hmm. And that was actually, and he was only 11. And it's such a big thing for an 11-year-old to say.
It's very moving. And also he said that his parents were proud of him, didn't he?
But his dad said in the end, and his dad said a few things, didn't he? Well, it will help avoid conflict, it will really help the home. But actually when the dad said the words, we will be proud of him too, you could see the boy shine even more, because then the parent and the child are on the same wavelength, aren't they?
So do you think it's quite critical then that you first have to identify what it is that you want to change, actually to name it? Because you were talking about last night, go away and write it down.
Yeah.
To identify what you'd like that to change into, what is the outcome that you want, and can you apply that to anything?
I apply it to everything in life. Literally, if you don't write that thing down, and I'm dyslexic, so I'm not a big fan of writing, but there's something about getting it out of your head and getting it onto paper and then getting it back into your head in that process that makes it real. Take the brand Motov8. I remember the night, I remember the moment, I remember exactly where I was when I came up with the name. And I remember typing it in on the computer to register it to see if it was available, and it was available. And I remember stretching my budget to spend that money to register that name and having nothing but that name.
Yeah.
And then between my mate and I going, this is it, and then starting to talk about it, it became real. And I knew that Motov8 would become a household brand. But it had to be put out, it had to be written, I had to see it, and then I had to consume it. And it's the same with anything you want in life. Whether it's a material possession, I take photos of things that I want, I put it in my phone, I put it on my bedroom door, and every time I leave my bedroom I touch it. And there's something about that visual or written record that brings it back home.
So it's almost like a process of activation, because you went one step further in the talk last night. You were talking about attaching a zero to it.
Mm-hmm.
Can you tell us about the significance of that?
Okay, so any parents who are listening who have sons or daughters for that matter who have been verbally, emotionally or socially bullied, it's a little bit different with the physical bullying, okay, because it's different. But with that emotional bullying that can cripple a kid's soul, it can really bring fear that won't allow them to move, almost like they're standing on the edge of a cliff and can't move for fear. So basically what I get them to do is to write down the words that they're being called. And boys and kids are called all sorts of things. The most is, if you think of it, I visualize someone vomiting when I hear some of the stuff that's said, because that's what they do. They rack their brain in a moment of an emotional charged moment to get out the most volatile, impacting thing. Doesn't matter who it is. It's their mum in the kitchen when she said no to something, or it's a kid in school who's pushed them or whatever. So those words, you get them out on paper, and then you attach a name to them. So the person who's calling you that name, the person who is impacting you emotionally with that. So we're writing out a mathematical equation, so to speak. So it'll be the word, let's say the word fat. They call you fat or ugly. Then you write the person's first name so that you know who you're talking about and no one else does if they find it. Then you write an equal sign. And then at the moment, you're placing somewhere between a 7 and a 10 on the value of what that person says to you.
Yeah.
So therefore, you're highly impacted every time they say it. Almost like it's the first time. So what I get kids to do is write a 0. Now in their head, that doesn't equal a 0 because they're so used to it having such an impact. But the more they rehearse that and the more they practice that, the more that becomes real. Yeah.
Which is your work, isn't it, Joe, in learning self-love? It's actually to speak over your life the same thing again and again. You might not believe it to begin with, but certainly then it becomes reality the more you speak it. 21 days to change.
Absolutely. And both techniques you've said are both empowering the individual themselves. It's giving them back their power to make their decisions, isn't it? Whether it's about walking away rather than swearing, or, you know, doing something else rather than physically hurting somebody, or whether it's putting value on somebody who's bullying you. Both instances, you're giving them back their power. And some kids at the end came up to us because we had the pleasure of hanging out for half an hour after your show, and we asked a couple of the kids, didn't we, what did they get out of it? You know, it was the same thing. We know more about our anger and we can walk away now, and you could see as if like a weight had been lifted off their shoulders. It was amazing.
So there's the workshop that I run is called Raging Bull, and what I didn't teach last night in the event, but I did talk one-on-one with that young guy that I got up, is the strategy that I teach for walking away. Because literally, you have a moment. So in an emotionally charged moment, there is a singular moment where you can walk away, and the minute you ignore that, it's gone, and your opportunity is finished. And you will find yourself in front of the principal for your actions, almost like one of those movies where you see them depicting speed in slow motion, but you can't stop it. So what I basically teach them, I talk about a story where I got done for shoplifting. My mum gave me $6 to buy a tube for my BMX. We were going to the farm for the weekend with the bike. I walked into Kmart and money in my pocket, got the bicycle tube, took it out of the package, walked around, looked around, put it down in front of my jeans and walked out the store. And then I had the security guard come and put his hand on my shoulder and say, "Excuse me, young man, I need you to come back in the store." And I usually get a young guy up the front, and I do that, give an example. I said, the only way that you will stop yourself in an emotionally charged moment is if you can arrest yourself. And the thing about an arrest is there is physical touch and there is words of authority. So I teach boys, grab a hold of yourself. In that moment, grab your wrist, put your hand on your heart, put your hands on your face, touch yourself, okay? Get a hold of yourself. And then you speak words of authority. I ask them, does a security guard have the right to, if he sees you shoplifting, to pull you up in it and bring you back inside? Yeah, that's his job, beyond reasonable doubt. Yeah. So the thing is, you actually can speak to yourself. Yeah. You can talk over your mind. You can speak over it and go, no, this is not going to happen. But you can only do that if you plan. So teach boys to arrest their thoughts in that emotional judgment, and you practice it. You go, I've done it on my bike. I've nearly been killed on the road, and pulled up next to the truck, and literally had to just go, right, get out of here right now, because otherwise you're going to be on the 6 o'clock news.
Yep.
You know?
And that's the power of words, isn't it? It's what we talk about all the time, the power of words, the power of thoughts, what we think we do. You know, when we have to keep practicing that over and over again, isn't it? Because we'll always have that bad voice that pops up. We've got the angel, we've got the devil, the two things are there conflicting all the time. But it's how, as you say, it's how you manage it.
But isn't it funny? It's so you can have an isolated word and my value of that word be 10 times your value of it. So like we could talk about paper folding and someone could talk about that and I'd just be like, okay, wake me up when we finish talking. But that person is completely lit up by it. And if you gave them $1,000 to spend on it, you would have made their life. Whereas I'm like, what a waste of money.
Because it's related to experience or it's
related
to passion.
Yeah, that's it.
Yeah. So I'm quite fascinated. We've got many listeners, I'm sure, who are struggling with teen boys or teen girls. Joe and I, between us, have got 8 teens. Between us, we've got 5 boys. Is that right? 4, 5.
There's
3,
5 of them,
boys.
yes. Don't make me do maths.
We've got too many children. And the purpose of our podcast is to actually put the message out there and normalise what people are going through in the sense of connecting them to other people who are going through the same experience. Because when you're raising teens, often you feel isolated. I'm the only one that's the bad parent. I'm the only one with a child that's in such rage and anger or taking drugs. What do you think is the biggest problem that parents today face raising teen boys in 2020?
I think the biggest problem facing, I don't even have to think about this, the biggest problem is is social sense over common sense. That now I understand that parents are listening to a podcast because they are seeking advice and or to complement what they're doing. Yeah. But after this podcast, after you've listened, stop and just go and activate what you're hearing, and don't worry about another podcast for another week or 2, okay? Because there's so many voices out there telling you this and telling you that. It's a little bit like, being vegan or being a celiac or whatever. 1 week, this is good for you. 1 week, that's good for you. And it's like you're in the ocean being tossed by waves left and you're doubting yourself.
Out there,
that is it.
So much.
But just come back to common sense, okay? Like, it doesn't take a rocket science to work out that 17 plus hours in a bedroom playing video games is going to bring an imbalance in your child. You don't need people's advice on that. What you need to do is go back in and take authority and earn back the respect that you've allowed to slowly diminish away from you.
And for parents that are frightened to do that for whatever reason, how do they do that?
Okay, so I get this all the time. You know, he's a big boy. Okay. So if he does something, well, 1, you call the police and you have him charged if possible. What you got to do is you got to separate the fact that you're his mum from that you are his parent, because they're 2 different things. Yeah. I get a lot of mums who, and sorry for the mums listening, but you're as much a part of the problem as you are a part of the solution, because you let him get away with it because you think, well, I can't do anything. Well, you can. So you either face one big battle, or you have fight after fight after fight or fight.
It's just enabling the parent, isn't it? It's giving them their power back. Like we deal with lots of parents and like, oh, my child's on the internet 24/7. I can't get them out of their bedroom.
Take the door off the bedroom.
Or turn the internet off.
Yeah.
I'm like, do you not pay for the internet fee? Just turn it off.
Yeah.
Oh, I never even thought of that.
Or I tried that and he punched holes in the walls or whatever. Cool. Leave the holes in his walls. Teach him how to fix them. Get someone in or whatever. But the bottom line is that you can actually take this back. But like I spoke last night about a renovation, you've let the thing get to where it's got to. So it's not going to happen overnight. You have got to put in the work. So what I teach parents is parenting a teenager is not like bringing up a toddler. It's not like bringing it. You're not there to be their best friend. You are there to raise them to be young men, and that is going to be painful.
And you're actually talking about separating, I think, the individual, the person themselves from the behaviour, aren't you? Because you're talking about actually for certain behaviours there's a consequence. So if it's that I'm going to call the police, there's a consequence for that. Mm-hmm. If you're going to smash holes in your wall, there's a consequence for that. You can still love that child as though they're the 4-year-old, separating the identity of the person from the behaviour.
100%. So I'm going to say something now that is, it's controversial, right? But if you can wrap your heads around what I'm saying and journey with me, it will save you so much anxiety. So I have been in the very thick of it. I have three kids. I have a 22-year-old, a 20-year-old, and a 17 going on 22-year-old daughter. Michael Carr-Gregg actually talks about, Princess Peach Face syndrome. That book was based on my daughter. Her name's Daisy, and I love her. She's amazing. But travel with me to this moment for a second. I've got a 17-year-old son at the time who is completely undone emotionally. He's been hanging out with the wrong people and just negative. He's depressed. He's anxious. And I literally never know. I'm on suicide watch. I'm on edge and all this. I have to come to a place where I accept, not defeat, but where I accept if my son was to take his own life, that I have to be okay with that. Not approve it, not be happy about it, not be, well, there you go. But he is a human being on the face of this planet as well as being my son. Mm-hmm. And he, whether I like it or not, can make that choice. And I can't control every moment of it. And if it is going to happen, then I can be there every moment but that moment. And I have to be okay with that if that happens. Coming to that place, I'm not saying visualizing it and picturing it and all that, but coming to that place where I had to be, well, I've been here myself. And if that happens, I have to deal with that. Coming to that place is actually what released me from the guilt that I would experience in disciplining him.
Yeah, and that's a huge topic, because I was going to say to you, and I'm so glad you raised suicide, because I think one of the biggest fears with your parenting is that, gosh, if I do this, what if it's the thing that sends them over the edge?
Yeah.
If I take my child to the hospital now because they have an eating disorder and I'm so worried about them, what if that is the thing that makes them commit suicide? And so we're fear-based parenting, and I'm sure that's been for many generations in different aspects. Fear-based parenting stops parents from making a decision to put the Xbox in the skip because they've just had enough of it. What if that's that one thing? And I love the way you say you have to take ownership over it, because if we can't control every aspect of our child's life. But to those parents that are worried about suicide then and are stepping back and not taking their authority back, what's the answer?
Oh, look, I can tell you from my lived experience and my professional experience, 9 times out of 10, what they're actually saying to you is it's how they're feeling inside, but their perspective is so screwed up. So I said last night that about 95% of teenagers walk themselves into mental health disorders. Yeah. They do. And parents are almost on the sidelines watching this happen. I can't name names, but I talked to a family the other day, and it's been 2 years that they've lived in this place. I'll give you an even better example. Actually, I was coaching a family, a 17-year-old son and a mum. And we sat down one day, and because the mum had told me that he threatened suicide on and off for 2.5 years. And we were about 3 minutes into a coaching session. I shut my laptop. I said, okay, I'm tired of this. And I said, mate, do me a favour. Tell me right now, do you want to end your life? Have you wanted to end your life? Do you want to end your life? He goes, no. And I said, well, your mum over here for the last 2.5 years has been doing her head in, concerned, worried about you. I said, tell your mum that. And he goes, tell her what? Tell her that you don't want to end your life and that you are not suicidal. And I said, because, and he did. And I said, so mum, have you heard him? I said, because you have manipulated your mum so much, and she hasn't done what she knows she should do for fear that you're going to hurt yourself. I said, it ends today. So we basically, the cover is blown because a lot of kids do this. And for mums out there who are getting upset with me right now, I know there are real genuine cases of hurt, pain, trauma. I know that. Mm-hmm. But most kids bring the trauma on themselves. And we as parents feel like we can't do anything when we know deep down exactly what we should be doing.
Yeah. But let's go back a little bit then, John. If you say that 95% of teens are walking into mental health,
mm-hmm.
if we go back to sort of the 8-9-year-olds, how can we prevent that? What's the preventative measure? Is it by reducing device time? What is it that we can put into place as parents?
Well, when you go back to that, you don't need to reduce it, you need to establish it. So you're establishing the boundaries then, and they're always going to push the boundaries. But if those boundaries are made of steel, they ain't moving.
What do those boundaries look like in terms of devices?
Well, each home is their own home. You know, it's time frame, it's location. So devices, you know, whether the devices are all put in the middle of the kitchen bench at night time, whether they're in the bedroom or like parents' bedroom or something like that. You establish those boundaries and you hold to them. And then if you have to put a disciplinary measure in place, and they crack it over that and cause more pain in the house, then you have a backup disciplinary measure for that. So they are well aware of where this is going to lead. Do you remember your parents saying, you know, that they're grounding you for a day? Yeah, do you want another one? Yep. Yeah, give it to me. So it's 2. Would you like another one? 3. So in that emotionally charged moment, that's not fair because parents, we do this. We set our kids up. We set them up for... because they can't reach that bar, because in an emotionally charged moment, they can't rationalise. But you make them aware of it beforehand, and you go, okay, so let's pick a common one, not cleaning your room. Okay, I'm going to ask you once, this is how this is going to work. I'm going to ask you once, and if I have to remind you, if I have to do this again, then this will be the measure of it. This will be the result. If you crack shits about that, then this will be the result. Yeah. And you have backup measures.
It's making your children aware, and that's exactly what you're saying. It's making them know what's going to happen if this happens. And when this does happen, make sure you carry on. Because how many times do you hear parents say, I'm going to count to 5, and if I count to 5 and this doesn't happen, I'm going to do this. Yeah. And then they count to 5 and they don't do it. It's false expectations, it's false promises. Yeah. It's putting set boundaries in place. Because at the end of the day, what do our children need? Our children need to know they are loved unconditionally for who they are.
But also they need to know they're safe, don't
absolutely.
they? And I think, I lived in boarding schools for 15 years raising teenagers, and the teenagers loved the boundaries that were in place. They loved the security. They want it. Teenagers, even though they're pushing the boundaries and saying they don't, and they're reacting so they don't, they need those boundaries and they feel really safe in it. And part of being a teen, to be able to mature into your identity and to be free where you're going, is to be so secure.
Yeah. I think a lot of parents just think their children are not going to love them because, as you say, it's all this fear-based. Like, my children go around to other people's house. My daughter says it especially. She says, I cannot believe the way my friends talk to their parents. Well, if my kids talk to me like that, I would just stop doing things for them. It's like what you say, put the consequence in place. If you're going to carry on talking to me like that, I'm not going to make dinner for you. If you're going to carry on talking to me like that, you're going to have to do all your own laundry.
The truth is, if you put up with that, you deserve it. Like, no woman deserves to be called a slut by their own son or a bitch. But if you put up with your son calling you that, then you have created that situation. You've allowed it to exist. You know, there are two kinds of fear in the world. There is fear that cripples you, and, you know, in no family do you want your son to have that sort of fear of his parents. You know, mum's going to lash out or dad's going to lash out. But there's another kind of fear, and that is a respectful fear. Now, when I come home to my house and my dog has done something wrong, it has a fear, but it's not, it's going to get beaten. It has a respectful fear that it has broken my trust. That is the sort of fear that we want from our kids. We want, you know, you hear all the old conversations. Back in my day, you know, you would never say that to your father. Well, there's two kinds of fear. That was because dad would beat the shit out of you, or because there was a respect and a reverence for your dad's presence or your mum's presence. Yeah. And, you know, the whole thing about Motov8 is, you know, my mum significantly influenced my life, and not in the way that maybe you would think. You know, my mum picked me up from so many school meetings, principals being kicked out of schools, you know, took the interview for my apprenticeship for me because I wouldn't go. Yeah. So I want to honour my mum and her memory. You know, she passed away 6 years ago, and that is actually what this is all about for me. It's about honouring my mum, because for so long I caused her pain, you know, and discomfort, and then between her and her husband, I caused so much angst in the house. And to me, this is what that fear is. It's a respect.
Yeah, and that's a healthy fear as well as a healthy. You know, there's different types of fears. You're saying that's a healthy fear, isn't it? Because and children forget, I think, that they should respect teachers, they should respect their parents, because they are in place of authority. But equally, the parents and the teachers have got to be good role models. And I think that's another thing for parents as well. You know, if you've got to respect yourself. Yeah. If you're not respecting yourself, then you're going to accept abuse from your children. Yeah. So you've got to really model that behaviour as well, haven't you? And that's where you put the boundaries in place, because it's not acceptable. And you certainly do not want your child leaving the house and treating other people like that.
And also to be kind to yourself. I mean, I love the way you honour your mother, because there's parents listening that just think, gosh, you know, my children don't feel that about me right now. I'm the mom, and my son certainly doesn't want to honour me. But just to remind you, parents listening, that you are doing an incredible job. It's a tough job, isn't it? There's nothing harder probably than raising teens right now. So, okay, you brought something interesting up, because we often focus on the kids. You know, my son's got low self-esteem, he doesn't have any motivation, and the truth is, well, that's because he doesn't value himself. He doesn't have confidence because he doesn't have competence. Most boys, when they try something, it doesn't work out, they fail, so they won't have a go at it. They try a project, they get the first bit done, and it gets hard, they give up. And I spoke last night about where I get my confidence from, and I base my confidence on solid information. It's from my competence and my ability to do something and do it well, and have it recorded and documented by other people, not just myself. You know, a reclusive person, someone who pulls himself away from society, end up being arrogant, because their opinions are right, but they've got no one to argue them with. There's no one to actually objectify and challenge them. And kids become like that because they pull themselves away from community. So every thought they have in their head becomes right, but that thought is never put up against real community. Yeah. So coming back to the parents. So if a boy doesn't value himself, he won't put in the effort. And there's a lot of mums, and we seem to be focusing on mums, but mums and dads who don't have a high enough value and respect of themselves. Yeah. So they'll put up with it. Yeah. And they'll talk about how frustrating it is, and how I don't know what to do. I'm at wit's end. I tried this. My mum dragged me from counsellor to coach to anyone who was in a suit who looked like they had letters behind their name. I got dragged to. But it wasn't until I hit crisis, until my value of myself changed, that I did something. I said this last night. People change for two reasons. They see the writing on the wall and they go, shit, that's me, and I've got to do something about this. And they take action. They raise their value of themselves, or they hit rock bottom. They hit a crisis, and then they become aware of how close they were. You know what? I've spoken to young people, and I've been there myself, around suicide.
And many people think that they're just going to wake up on the other side of it and it'll be a new life and whatever. And that's just not the reality. So we need both boys and a parent. So if you've got a son who's struggling with self-esteem and all that, have a look at yourself and ask yourself, well, what am I modeling to him? Like, how do I value myself? What does he see me doing in my life that is an example for him in this?
Isn't that interesting? Because my Joe and I, obviously podcasting together, we've just written a book that we're publishing, and my daughter said to me the other day, who's 19, Mum, I look at you and you're such a role model to me. I see you're so excited and so motivated about what you're doing. I see this energy and passion in you. I want that. I'm hungry for it. So that to me just said, you know, our teenagers are watching us, even though we think they're independent and doing their own thing and they don't really care about their parents at all because we're so old, past generation. They're watching us. We're role modelling everything that we do. And if we're role modelling not doing our own work, they see that. If 100%. We're telling them, find your identity, what is it you want to do, but we don't know, they're watching it, aren't they? It's actually quite critical.
That's what I'm saying. It's like, have you got healthy relationships with your partner at home? Have you got healthy relationships with your friends? You know, what do you do for work? Are you passionate about your work? What do you complain about? It's everything. Every part of you that makes you you.
We need to
your
take
children
ownership.
take on that on board.
And you know what? We send confusing messages to our kids because when they were like, you know, knee-high to a grasshopper, we would say, mate, you can do anything. You can be anything, you know, just believe in yourself, mate, you can achieve it. And then when they're 13, 15, 16, and they want to go off and do this, we go, just calm down. Like, okay, you need to get this first. And we're like, well, hang on, what about this? Where are we going? You know, something I was just thinking about was the truth of it is, by the time a boy is 10, 11 years old, you've modelled everything to them. Success, failure, stress, anger, loss, trauma, and 'cause whether you like it or not, they've watched you through that. And here's the thing, and this is pretty hard to take, but I point the finger right back at myself. I have a 22-year-old son, I have a 20-year-old son, and I have a 17-year-old daughter. And I share my wins with them, I share my losses with them, I share my successes, I share my strategies. You know, particularly with my older son, we'll talk about money. And I pride myself that I'm always having significant breakthroughs in my life. So that, because the truth is, if you don't have new stuff, if you're not developing yourself, if you are not experiencing new things in your life, you've stopped parenting your child. Because that's what they look to, that's what they're listening to. Even if they don't live in the same home, I get mums, I get dads getting angry at me because I don't work with 22-year-olds. And I get them writing on my page, you know, well, they suffer from this too. And I'm like, yes, but it's their responsibility now to deal with that. The best thing you can do if you've got an older teen or a young adult is model to them. Like, develop yourself, go back to study, take on a new role, travel, go and do something that they'll look to the side and go, oh, what's mum doing now? Oh, check that out.
So you're talking about continually growing and having the conversations and communicating. I want to ask you one last question. Come back to Motov8. We had a lovely conversation earlier and you said, parents say to you all the time, how do I motivate my child? You had a lovely answer.
Well, the truth is that you can't, the truth is you can't motivate your son. All right, because he no longer does things for chocolate or lolly. Well, some teenagers do, but they no longer act like that. Okay, so basically, your son is motivated, and just maybe not about the things you wanted to be motivated. Look at where he spends his time, money, and attention, and you'll find what he's passionate about. Okay, now the thing is, my question is, does that connect him with something bigger than himself, or is that all around himself? So I talk to young people about my mentors, and I don't look up to people who are all about themselves. That if they're an artist, if it's all about them, not interested. If they're a sports hero or an author or a podcaster, if it's all about them, I'm not interested. It's got to lead to something bigger than themselves. In high school, as a teenager, I was an attention seeker. It all started and ended with me. As a grown-ass adult, I'm an attention seeker. But once I've got your attention, I then point you in another direction, which is away from me. The attention is go and saturate yourself in community and watch what happens. Watch the magic happens, because what you think your future is about now is coming from an insular mindset. When you connect yourself to something bigger than yourself, your ability to believe for a future, a bigger future, is amplified.
Awesome, I love it. Look, your child is already motivated. Look at where they're spending their time and their money. I love it. It's great. And then to build on that, I guess, isn't it?
Yeah.
To extend that into other areas of their lives and build confidence from that.
Helps you build the strategies from where you know where their motivation is, doesn't it?
So can I just say one more thing?
You can.
Because I left that gap there in case you want to cut it off.
No, we don't want to cut you out.
Cut him off.
So 12 months ago, I was in the driveway of my house. I got a message from my mum after one of my events, and she just said, "Thank you so much for speaking into my boy's life. I just wish you did this for girls." And it wasn't the first time I got this. I had avoided running a program for girls for quite a long time because girls are complicated. Boys are easy. Boys have a fight, it's over in 6 minutes. Girls have a fight, it goes for 6 months. And 6,023 of their friends know about it, are involved in it, you know. But that was it. I talked to my daughter and I said, we've got to do something. So together, we came up with Savage Angel. And Savage Angel, if you think of those two words, they don't go together. But we've made them go together. Because an angel speaks of innocence, speaks of guidance, speaks of direction, speaks of spirit.
Yeah.
And the savage is, get the fuck out of my way because I'm coming through. And the slogan is, because not all girls just want to have fun. And if you're listening right now, then close your eyes and imagine a field of sugarcane, a long field of sugarcane. And along that wall of grass, you can see where people have walked in. And those people, in my mind, are people like Rosa Parks, Joan of Arc, Oprah, Ellen, Michelle Obama, world famous women who have trailblazed their own path. Now, as you look back at that field, what I want to do is get girls to walk their own path into that grass, to become those people who have gone before us. So that's why it's not all girls just want to have fun, because some girls actually really want to kick ass in life. And so when we come back to New Zealand, I'd love to bring that
and the
with
dates,
us.
you're back in New Zealand of May...
30th, 31st and 1st of June at the moment. So by the time this goes out, the events will all be up live. So 30th, we are in Hamilton, sorry. 31st, we're in Christchurch, and the 1st of June, we are in Invercargill.
Invercargill, you said.
Invercargill.
No, thank you.
And if parents want to see the details and connect with you, your website is?
Alright, so the website is motov8.com.au, and it's spelled MOTOV and the numeral 8.com.au. Or Facebook is Motov8, Instagram is Motov8, and Savage Angel, Facebook is Savage Angel, Instagram is Savage Angel Girls.
Fantastic. Thank you so much for all your messages, and I think they're all clear and concise, and I think there's loads of tips for parents and for teenagers there. So thank you for everything, and we can't wait to come to your next event.
And also on behalf of the parents that you're reaching and the teens, I know you're changing many lives. Thank you so much, because your work is desperately needed. We need more mentors and role models like you that will get out there and get that message across. So thank you so much for what you're doing for our teens and parents.
My pleasure.
Thanks so much for being with us today. For us to inspire others to live their magnificently imperfect life, please subscribe and leave us a 5-star review on iTunes or on your podcast app. You can also follow us on Instagram and Facebook at Pods with Posh and Pool. We can't wait for you to join us on our next episode. Love, light and peace.